Last week, I stopped short of calling the Las Vegas Raiders a full-on get-right game for the Green Bay Packers. This week against the Denver Broncos, it looks like, at the very least, this could be a get-right game for the Green Bay Packers offense. It is a Locked On Packers, Locked On Broncos crossover to talk about all the big stories, the big matchups, and the keys to victory in this one. All that on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And this show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. A Locked On Packers, Locked On Broncos crossover Thursday. Sayre Bedinger from Locked On Broncos. And, of course, me. I'm there too. Let's go.
It is crossover Thursday. I'm Sayre Bedinger, co-host of Locked On Broncos, here with Peter Bukowski, host of Locked On Packers, and want to thank every single one of you for making Locked On Broncos or Locked On Packers your first listen of the day every single day, free and available on YouTube as well as wherever you listen to podcasts. And this crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Peter, it's not Super Bowl 32, but it's Broncos Packers. And, these two teams are kind of headed towards the bye week with a lot of question marks. But I want to know from you, from the Packers side of things right now, very interesting team, very young team. What's the biggest storyline going into this game in Denver?
It's the offense. It is trying to find that rhythm that we saw a little bit more in the first 3 games and saw a lot less of in the second 2 games. And it actually wasn't so different in the Lions game 2 weeks ago, or I guess 3 NFL weeks ago, but 2 games ago for the Packers, where they couldn't get much going in the first half. And then in the second half, they take off, and all of a sudden Jordan Love looks like a totally different player. That's exactly what happened in the Saints game. It's just that the Saints weren't good enough and didn't play well enough to give the Packers a chance to not give the Packers a chance to come back in that one. 17 points down in the fourth quarter, and Jordan Love brings them all the way back in that Saints game, a signature Jordan Love moment to start this young season. So this has been part of the learning curve here. And you mentioned the young team. For your Broncos listeners, this is the youngest team of pass catchers, the youngest pass battery since the expansion Browns. That's how young this team is. And that expansion Browns team did not win many games. So this is an experiment unlike we've seen around the NFL. And so there are going to be inconsistencies, but the highs, Sayre, are high. In fact, I was just looking at some of these splits. They don't make any sense. Okay, this just gives you a really good idea of the weirdness of this season. On first down this year, Jordan Love is 7th in EPA per play, estimated points added per play. On third down, the money down, he's 13th in EPA per play. On second down, he is the worst quarterback in the NFL by a mile. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't compute in any way. But this is, in a lot of ways, what happens when you've got Christian Watson, year 2, Romeo Doubs, year 2, Jaden Reed is a rookie, Dontavian Wicks is a rookie. All of they have 3 tight ends on this 53-man roster. They're all rookies. It is going to be this inconsistent, and it happens to be against a team this week that has a, so far, historically bad defense. I have to think that is at least one of the big storylines for Denver right now, is what is going on with Vance Joseph and this defense.
Right. No, it definitely is. And you're spot on with that. And, every crossover episode that I've done this year, Peter, has been about how the Broncos can be kind of the get right game for a lot of teams. I'm not sure if maybe the get right situation is on second down for Jordan Love there. Yeah, Vance Joseph's defense has come under a lot of fire this season, and understandably so. I mean, Broncos fans had a bad taste in their mouths with Vance Joseph to begin with, being that, we just fired him 5 years ago from the team as the head coach. Very, I don't know if ironically is the right word, but kind of maybe just a crazy thing. It was right after Patrick Mahomes' very first NFL start back into the 2017 season when he got that last game. That was Vance Joseph's final game, I believe, as the Broncos head coach, or it was one of the last ones. But anyways, I digress. Historically bad defense for the Denver Broncos. Like you said, 70 points allowed against Miami Dolphins. I mean, we can look at any stats or any splits that we want for the Broncos defense this year. Ultimately, bad is the category that they're in for every single one of them, up until this Kansas City Chiefs game on Thursday, where everybody's thinking Broncos are just going to go get boat raced by the Chiefs, which they kind of did in a way. I mean, the Chiefs kind of still dominated them anyway, but they only scored 19 points. They were 4 of 13 on third downs in that game, 1 of 5 in the red zone. So it was the best defensive performance we have seen from them. And maybe not so coincidentally came off the heels of the team trading Randy Gregory, getting rid of Frank Clark as well, who had an illness for that Chiefs game. I'm sure he was just sick of the Broncos. But, ultimately, is it something they can build on? What is this team going to do coming out of that Thursday night game? Like we weren't sure going into Thursday that last week, are they even going to show fight for this team? And they did. So now the offense has a lot of question marks, and I know I get the inconsistency factor there, but to me, I feel like, I've watched a lot of the Packers this year. It feels like to me, Jordan Love is kind of still, if we were to just take his scouting report coming out of Utah State back in 2020, he's kind of still that guy from what I see. A little bit of inconsistency, like you said, super high highs. Packers fans are not necessarily used to the extreme growing pains, or maybe the extremes within the quarterback developing. Where's your perspective on that? As far as Packers fans, are they being patient with Jordan Love? Are they ready to kind of be like, all right, this is not gonna, I'm seeing that's not gonna be a long-term thing? Where are they at with him as far as the long-term?
I think it's important to distinguish between where the fans are right now and where the organization is right now with Jordan Love. The organization seems to have supreme confidence in what Jordan Love is doing. And part of that, I think if you watch him and you watch the way that this offense is organized, the way that they are intending to run it, I think there's a lot of signal in what a coach asks a quarterback to do, especially a coach that you think is competent. Like sometimes, right, there are coaches who are just not very good at their job, and they're asking their quarterback to do something that is just antithetical to what they're good at and antithetical to what a team is good at. I think Matt LaFleur has proven he is at least a competent offensive coach. I think he has shown the ability at times to be a really, really good offensive coach. They are letting Jordan Love sling that rock, Sayre. I mean, he is throwing it around the yard and throwing it down the field. Top 5 all season. And in fact, only recently has he been knocked down from the top spot in average depth of target. And if you look at, say, third downs, he's second in average depth of target. And part of that is because they're third, and their distance to go on third down average right now is 7 yards. But they're not doing the thing that a lot of teams do with young quarterbacks and say, okay, on 3rd and 7, we're throwing a screen, or it's a designed, not a true tunnel screen, but that quads look everyone is running, where the inside slot runs a little shallow route, and you've got 3 blockers out in front, where it's like, okay, just make the throw to the flat and see what they can do. Don't play quarterback. They're asking Jordan Love to play big boy quarterback, and it's because they think he can do it. And part of the problem right now is the context around him is so inconsistent. The offensive line is going through its own shuffles. Rasheed Walker, former 7th round pick, he's playing left tackle. He's a pretty good 7th round pick. But as a NFL left tackle, is he a pretty good player? TBD on that. Certainly not a run blocker at this point. Zach Tom dealing with injury the last couple of weeks. John Runyon Jr. dealing with injury last week. And Max Crosby, as your fans are going to know, just does this to everybody. He is going to wreck games because he's just that good a player. And And then all of those young pass catchers that you mentioned, plus Aaron Jones being hurt. Aaron Jones was going to be the engine of this team. If you watch them in week 1, when they needed to make a play, it was Aaron Jones on 4th and 2, and he scores and it breaks the game open. In the first drive of the second half, Aaron Jones had, on the very first drive of the game, Aaron Jones had been the engine. They go down the field, they score a touchdown. He didn't have a touch the rest of the first half. First drive of the second half, he was the guy that drove them down the field. Run game, pass game. They hit a beautiful throwback screen at 50 yards that sets up a touchdown, and they're off and running. And that was the game that they blew out the Bears. He hasn't been healthy the rest of the season. He played some against Detroit, but has otherwise been out with this hamstring injury. He seems to be back close to 100%. And I think that's going to be really, really important for Jordan Love because, as I mentioned, this offense is designed to throw everything deep. They only recently had a player getting any sort of level of targets really in volume inside 10 yards in terms of depth. That's supposed to be Aaron Jones. That's supposed to be what he does. And he's not been around to do it. It's just not what A.J. Dillon does. And they don't have a third running back that they feel comfortable doing that stuff with. So he is so important for what their offense does that I think just his return is going to make life so much easier for Jordan Love that you're going to get a better read for who Jordan Love is as a passer. If the offensive line is just okay, we saw him make some incredible throws against Detroit, pressure in his face, Aiden Hutchinson bearing down. He throws a dime to Romeo Doubs on 4th and 9 in the red zone. Like, those kinds of high-level quarterback plays are there. If things are just a little more stable around him, I think you'll see a really talented player.
I think so too. I've always liked Jordan Love, and I believe in that player. And we'll see if the Denver Broncos defense can make life hard on him, or if it's one of those games again for the Denver Broncos defense this coming week. And we're going to talk more about the game within the game, some of these key matchups here going into the Denver Broncos and Green Bay Packers matchup in the Mile High City and Week 7 here on this episode. Crossover Thursday, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Packers.
Today's episode of Locked On Packers and Locked On Broncos brought to you by our friends at BirdDogs. BirdDogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. I'm wearing the joggers right now, and I just wore the shorts to work out. That's how versatile these things are. I can wear them in a professional setting if I want to. I can wear them to run to the grocery store if I want to, or just sitting around lounging if I want to. They work in all of those contexts because not only are they incredibly comfortable with their cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. In fact, I wore the khaki joggers yesterday. If you didn't look closely, you would know that they're not just khakis, but they fit and feel to me like joggers, which is the most important thing. How do they feel to me personally? That's what I care about when it comes to clothes. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or enter promo code LockedOnNFL at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. I know I don't want to take mine off, and I don't plan on taking mine off. Maybe until I go to bed, maybe after, maybe I sleep in them. I've done that before too. And football season is here, and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. East on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. That means Locked On Broncos, Locked On Packers for sure. Host Anitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Crabb will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchups, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from people like Sayre and me and Cody and our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel.
We're breaking down the matchups within the matchups here. Denver Broncos versus Green Bay Packers. A very young team in the Green Bay Packers coming into a city where the Denver Broncos have a number of guys, veterans, could be on the cusp of maybe departing the team sooner rather than later. We'll see what the trade deadline brings, but a lot on the line in this game. Despite the poor record of the Denver Broncos, I know that it's going to be exciting. But before we break down the matchups, want to give a huge shout out to all of you that make Locked On Broncos or Locked On Packers your first listen of the day every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can watch us for free on YouTube or listen anywhere that you get podcasts. Thank you so much for making us part of your day, whether you're working out, whether you're in the car driving, or whatever you're doing, however you're choosing to make us part of your day. Thanks for doing so. We appreciate it. Peter, the matchups within the matchup here, the Broncos, I guess offensively, defensively, is there anything that stands out to you in particular that you're gonna be keeping your eye on in this game? I think there's a lot of different things that we could break down, but what stands out the most to you?
Can the Packers convince Jerry Jeudy to take the plane back with them? That's the matchup that I'm looking for. No. Or Justin Simmons, that's another good one. It seems like you mentioned the veterans that could be on the move in the next couple of weeks here as the trade deadline approaches. I think the Packers last year, remember, they reportedly made offers for Jerry Jeudy, or at least had some interest in Jerry Jeudy. The asking price was apparently too high. They moved on. Darren Waller was someone that they were looking at. They made the offer for Chase Claypool, and ultimately they didn't get any of those players. And I think they're pretty happy currently with the receivers that they have. But we mentioned that Packers offense against this Broncos defense. I think the other part of this that is going to scare some Packers and Packers fans is, okay, what if Sean Payton just does the thing where he says, I'm going to stick to this running game. Javonte Williams, please just go carry our offense. That's the thing. If you're a Packers fan, you're going, that's the only way that it seems like they can generate consistent offense, is he's just a really good player. I kind of like what I've seen out of Jaleel McLaughlin, and Samaje Perine has always been. He was a name that I threw out a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, AJ Dillon looks cooked. Like maybe the Packers could get Samaje Perine for cheap, just like some sort of day 3 pick swap. Like he's the third running back on this team right now. That would be the other place, in addition to everything we talked about at the top. I kind of just don't want to rehash that part of it. But obviously, the thing that I'm most looking forward to is that matchup, the Packers offense versus the Broncos defense. But more granular, I think this run game, if the Packers can successfully stop the run game, this passing game just looks like a mess, man. And maybe you can tell me like what you see out there, because it doesn't make any sense. Russell Wilson can't possibly be this bad. I've always liked Cortland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy's a nice player. Marvin Mims, for whatever reason, can't get targets. Don't understand that. Like, what's going on with this Broncos offense, dude?
It's weird. It is super weird. And I'm glad you brought that up, because first handful of weeks of the season, look, the Broncos passing game was pretty good. I mean, Russell Wilson, I think, only has one game or 2 games now this season without multiple TD passes. And that wasn't all just in garbage time, where, I mean, a lot of people would like to say, hey, he's putting up production, but it's after the game's already over. No, that's not necessarily been the case, right? So it's just a weird deal. It was last week. Yes. The Cortland Sutton, although that was a nice play by Sutton. He really needed that. The
touchdown was gorgeous. Yeah.
Great play. But yes, at any rate, it's been ugly for Russell Wilson for the most part. And I think that seeing him play poorly against the Chiefs and then the game prior to that against the Jets, a lot of fans are like, okay, those first 4 games were a bit of a mirage. Now we're kind of back to where we were last year, where Russ is coming off the first read and taking off. I mean, he's first in the NFL, if I remember correctly, Peter, in time to throw. It's not like the pocket is just, he's not just sitting in the pocket. He's beelining out of the pocket almost immediately after that first read. The Broncos are bringing in extra offensive linemen to max protect, which is part of the reason why you're not seeing a ton of Marvin Mims targets. I mean, Quinn Bailey almost feels like and if you don't know who Quinn Bailey is, good, you shouldn't know who he is. He's like the Broncos' 4th offensive tackle on their roster. He's coming in as an eligible extra lineman to help protect, because, well, Mike McGlinchey, a big money free agent, not working out so well. And the Broncos' refusal to commit to the run has really stifled their passing game overall. So I don't know if it was just Nathaniel Hackett or anything like that. I know Russell had a lot to do with that last year. His injuries had a lot to do with that. The offensive line and their injuries had a lot to do with that. But Sean Payton, you kind of expected him to come in and raise the floor of everything. And we saw that, I think, throughout the first handful of weeks. But unfortunately, these last couple of weeks, I mean, Peter, against the Kansas City Chiefs, Sean Payton called a timeout after the Broncos failed to convert a 3rd down with like 20, 30 seconds left in the first half. It was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. He basically gave them 3 points at the end of the first half. And he said after the game, well, it's a boneheaded mistake. So to put it lightly, I'm looking forward to that matchup of the Russell Wilson, Sean Payton versus Joe Barry in that Packers defense, and how they adjust to what we've seen against the Chiefs, against Robert Saleh and the Jets, who kind of had their way against that Broncos offense. There's plenty of matchups within that. Like you said, if you want to get granular about it, I mean, we're obviously wanting to see Jaleel McLaughlin and Javon. For Broncos fans, they just want to see the good young players step up. And a lot of Broncos fans, Peter, are just hoping the team finds a way to lose while playing well, to get a quarterback in next year's draft. That's the impression that I'm getting. I don't feel like the organization, like you said, though, with Jordan Love, has as much backing behind Russell Wilson at this point. It kind of feels like the writing is on the wall for him to be gone in 2024. So at this point, we're wondering, how soon are we going to see Jarrett Stidham?
Let me just tell you, one player that did stand out to me, who was one of the only players that I wrote notes about when I studied this team, and I went back and watched the coach's tape of the last few games. One of the only defensive players I wrote any notes about was Nick Bonitto. And he was someone who I kind of liked coming out of the draft. I know he's undersized, but the juice, the quickness, the athleticism, like that stuff shows up. He can be disruptive. I really like some of the stuff that I saw from him. I know he's a young player who's probably never going to be an elite kind of pass rusher, but it's just someone I really that stood out to me, and someone that I saw make some plays. How has in this defense that has just become a shell of its former self, how are you seeing these guys deployed in ways that don't make sense to you, or they're struggling with? Because like Patrick Surtain is a good player, and it's not so different from the group last year that with Ejiro Evero was a legitimately good group. And so what is at the root, you think, of the failings? I'm sure you guys have spent a ton of time talking about this, so your listeners might be sick of hearing about it, but like, it's certainly something that I have not been able to have a ton of time to talk about on our show. So my listeners would love to hear from you about it.
Yeah, no, the root of the failure, I think, starts in the trenches, where the Broncos just haven't been physical enough on the inside. I mean, Jonathan Harris, and maybe like Quinn Bailey, is a player that Packers fans have never heard of, but he's a starting defensive lineman for the Denver Broncos. And it kind of says it all right there. I mean, he's not playing well enough. And he's just, the Broncos did look into signing a guy like Shelby Harris, didn't work out, but it starts down there on the defensive line, where they just haven't been physical enough inside, and teams have been able to have their way in the running game. As far as Pat Surtain, you kind of have seen him over the first 6 games of the season washed out a lot, because, either the Broncos aren't having him follow around a team's best receiver, or they're playing with way too much cushion, and teams are just able to get things underneath. So I think Pat Surtain, he proved, like against Garrett Wilson when they played the Jets, like he can dominate if you're willing to float him around the field and match him up against the best receiver. That just hasn't happened consistently. And then on the other side, well, we're not going to throw at Pat Surtain. We're going to throw at Damari Mathis, right? Who's your other starter. Damari Mathis has not stepped up at all this season after a really good rookie year. Justin Simmons was hurt for a little bit there. So then you had Delary and Turner Yell on the back end, with Kareem Jackson, whose best days in coverage probably behind him at this point. So it's been all encompassing. Linebackers are not, they're not getting to their gaps quickly enough in the running game. Josie Jewell, Alex Singleton, those two guys, they've played pretty well, but I wouldn't say it's been even close to what we saw last year, where those two guys were basically living behind the line of scrimmage. It hasn't happened, and that, I think, is a result of the D-line. So it's sort of all encompassing. No one player or position group to blame, but I'm glad you brought up Nick Bonitto, that edge position group for the Denver Broncos. One of the only exciting position groups on the team right now, as far as, like you said, we talked about this on an earlier episode this week. Can any of those edge guys become that dude at the end of games that closes out a game, whether it's Bonitto, Jonathan Cooper, or we all want to see Baron Browning back on the field this week? And that's the hope, and that's the belief. So those are some big things, Peter, I would say, for as far as that Broncos defense putting up some legendary numbers, not in the good way that you want to see. But those are areas that can be keys to victory for the Denver Broncos, or for the Green Bay Packers for that matter, if they can exploit it. And we're going to break down all the keys to victory on this special crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Packers.
Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Packers road favorites in this one, 1-point favorites. That line, at least last I checked, has not moved from where it opened about a week ago. And right now, new customers can get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 back in bonus bets, win or lose. That's not usually how this works at a sports book. Usually you don't get money when you lose, but FanDuel is going to do that for you because you're a Locked On Packers listener. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel or Locked On Broncos, there's no better time to get in on the action, but only if the Packers win. Just kidding. To join FanDuel to get in on all of the action. The app is easy to use. Spreads, player props, over-unders, futures, all kinds of fun stuff. I'm currently holding a lot of Jordan Love futures, Packers futures that I feel pretty good about. Have not put any money on this game. We'll maybe talk about that here in just a second. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And today's episode also brought to you by our friends at Jase Medical. There's so much uncertainty in the world right now. It's important to be prepared, from the fighting in the Middle East to fires in Hawaii, hurricanes and tornadoes in Florida. Emergencies can strike at any time, and it is crucial to be prepared. That's why the Jase case is there for you. A personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add on additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Jase Medical now offers customizability for your Jase case with dozens of add-on medications. Choose the medications that best fit you and your family's unique needs. This is key. Go to jasemedical.com and enter Locked On at checkout to get a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code Locked On at jasemedical.com. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers and Locked On Broncos their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you.
And we do love starting our day with all of you, and we want to talk about some keys to victory for both of these teams. It's going to be a fun game. I always think, even as bad as the Broncos record is, look, Broncos country, we're going to be begging for football here in a couple months. So let's enjoy it while we got it. Let's do some evaluating, even if the team's not winning. But if they are going to win, Peter, I think it's going to be, as we just kind of talked about, a perfect segue. The pass rush for the Denver Broncos is going to be a key reason why they win this game. If they are able to win it, Nick Bonito, he's on pace for 16 sacks. Always fun to say you're on pace for something 5-6 games into a season. So I'm going to live in that realm as long as I can. But hey, he's playing well. He's playing much better than he did as a rookie. A lot of progression from Nick Bonito. And we've seen progression from Jonathan Cooper on the other edge, and Baron Browning hopefully coming back for this game. I think if the Broncos are going to win this game, the pass rush specifically off the edge, going to be a big reason why. Those guys can get to the QB in a hurry. They can affect the game. We haven't seen them really create a ton of turnovers. There was the one against the Bears where they had the strip sack from Bonito. Jonathan Cooper took it back for a TD. We want to see more of that from the Denver Broncos. I'm sure Packers fans don't want to see it this weekend, but those are two young guys that you really want to see them make game-changing plays to get that confidence going forward. So I think that could be a big key to victory in this one.
That segues perfectly with mine here because it is penalties and turnovers. When you look at this offense, one of the reasons why I mentioned that crazy second down stat where Jordan Love is by far the worst quarterback in the league on second down, but like pretty good on first and third down. One of the big reasons is negative plays on first down. It's penalties, a holding penalty here, a negative run, and all of a sudden it's 2nd and 12, it's 2nd and 15, it's 2nd and 20. Their average yard to gain on second down has been 2nd and 8. Well, if their average line to gain is 2nd and 8 and their average line to gain on third down is 3rd and 7, that means second down has been a really big problem. And part of the reason is because they're setting themselves up in these disadvantageous situations. Also, last week, they hold Devontae Adams to 4 catches for 45 yards. They hold Josh Jacobs to 69 yards, nice, on 20 carries. So we're talking about 3.5 yards per carry. And they lose. Why do they lose? 3 turnovers. It is the turnovers and the penalties that are hurting this young team. And there's other inconsistencies, missed assignments, but you see the offensive line youth and there's a lack of cohesion there. That shows up in the penalties, the holding penalties. They're not able to get to a stunt pass off. Turns into a hold. Those kinds of things, miscommunication. They don't get the protection call right. turns into a hold or illegal use of hands or, a double cut block, something like that. If they don't turn the ball over, I think that's key for Green Bay, because I think this Packers defense is built to take advantage of the things that the Broncos are worst at from an offensive standpoint. And so that is good news for this Packers defense. The Packers defense, with the exception of the fourth quarter against the Falcons, has not been the reason they have lost basically at all this season. The first half against the Lions, I think you could say for sure, but guess what the Packers did in that game too? Turn the ball over. And so that has been such a key for this team. It is a key for every team, but especially a young team like this that just can't overcome stuff like that. Can't turn the ball over. And I think one of the reasons is the Broncos defense has been that bad. Don't give them reasons to play a little bit better. And that's why I don't think you're going to see a lot of targets at Pat Surtain, who I do think actually I meant to bring this up earlier in the game. I think he's going to follow Christian Watson in this game. I think that will be part of the plan, because everyone else is so young or unproven. The Packers have one guy. The Packers are going to need someone like Luke Musgrave. I'm going to give you that, my offensive X factor. Luke Musgrave is the guy to me, because he's been this close to a big play in every game. And they hit it in week 1 and they haven't really been able to hit it since then. I think they're going to try and scheme up multiple kinds of ways to do it in this game. And if they do, I think they win.
I love that. I love Luke Musgrave as well. I've been very excited to see his progression. Broncos brought him in for a visit before the draft, and Cody and I talked on a number of episodes.
The ceiling is unlimited for him.
I agree. I loved that pick, and I love the double up with Tucker Kraft, right? Shout out South Dakota State. I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, yeah. Peter. So a lot of love for him there. I'm excited for their development as well. Love what the Packers, how they're building things there. Brian Gutekunst come under a lot of fire, but I think you can see there's a ton of talent there. He's built something really special, and Broncos fans are really hoping for that as well. I'm not sure how much of a predictions guy you are, Peter, in terms of the score. I know you said you haven't made any bets on this game. I'm certainly not making any bets on the Broncos at any point anytime soon, because I don't know what to expect from them. I feel like this is a game, though, first to 20, first to 23, that kind of sounds and feels a bit right to me, although I'm not sure the Broncos are going to get there.
I do usually give score predictions. I felt pretty good. Last week I nailed the Raiders. I said 17, but I said 27-17. I really have no feel for the score in this one, because we haven't seen a full Christian Watson game where he's been fully healthy. We haven't seen a full Aaron Jones game when he's been fully healthy. So I want to believe in this offense, Sarah. I really do. But until they prove it, I'm gonna look more like, okay, 21-17, that kind of like. I think they can absolutely go to Denver and score 30. But I cannot say that with any conviction right now as we sit here today. If they go and do it, then okay, now in 2 weeks against Minnesota, I can say, yeah, they're going to go score 30 on Minnesota. I probably won't, but I could. I think that is on the table. But for the moment, I have to be a little bit more conservative. I think we're looking at something like, I can certainly see a game where it's like 14-10. Like, that would not surprise me if we got a game like that. I think this game will be close if I had to predict, but I could also see, I think it's more likely the game will be close than not in either direction. But I also think it's more likely that the Packers win by 2 scores than the Broncos win by 2 scores, which is why I feel pretty comfortable taking the Packers here.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think barring a repeat performance from that Denver defense, certainly don't want a repeat performance from the offense of what we saw against the Chiefs or against the Jets for that matter. Broncos got to find their identity offensively. Maybe this week they really lean on Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and like you mentioned earlier, Samaje Perine. We'll see what Sean Payton is able to do. We'll see how things play out in this one. All I know is that Locked On Broncos, Locked On Packers, we'll have you covered every single step of the way. And we want to thank you for joining this episode, this Crossover Thursday special edition. My first time joining Peter Bukowski on a Crossover Thursday. So shout out to all of you who make Locked On Broncos, Locked On Packers your first listen of the day every single day. And we'll see you tomorrow.
All right, another Crossover Thursday in the books. Chris Harris joins us tomorrow, former Denver Broncos All-Pro, on the show tomorrow. Can't wait for that conversation. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Boom. Bingo. Let's do this. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live on our YouTube page, like we will be after the game on Sunday, go subscribe over on our Locked On Packers YouTube page so you can stay Locked On Packers.